right, mics and cameras are good. Thanks everybody. We are running tight on time today, so we just have time for a few questions. If I could just get a show of hands and then point towards there. We'll go with Chris first.
Premier, you talked about trying to get a new pipeline built to Prince Rupert of 1 million barrels a day for bitumen. What is the state of the progress on the discussions? What kind of proponents are you talking to, and how quickly can you get it going?
Well, we're talking to all of the pipeline proponents, anyone who has had success in building a pipeline in Canada and has an interest in perhaps coming together as a consortium, or if one emerges as being a principal proponent, then we'll be interested in talking to them too. But we know that it's a chicken and egg problem, that no one's going to come forward with a project without some guarantee that's going to be approved. And so what we're going to do is walk with that group to test out the 2-year timeline and see if we can get on the project list. So I feel like the Prime Minister, I want to take him at his word that he wants to operate in good faith. So we're going to operate in good faith, and we hope that we'll be able to have more to tell you in a few weeks.
Just to follow up then,
Yep.
You mentioned the fact that you talked with the Prime Minister about the pathways being on the national list. That's obviously something you want to see. But is there kind of a grand bargain here that if he gives the green light to pathways, that he will also give the green light to an oil sands?
That's certainly what we're proposing to him, because think of it this way, the Pathways project could be anywhere from 10 to 20 billion when it's fully built out. At the moment, that's 100% cost, because there's no revenue associated with that. Now, if you couple it with a 1 million barrel per day pipeline, well, that allows you $20 billion worth of revenue year after year after year for the lifetime of that project. All of a sudden, a 10 to $20 billion cost to decarbonize, it looks a lot more attractive when you have a new source of revenue. So that's what we pitched the Prime Minister on, yes.
Thanks, Chris, and then we'll go to Robert, and we'll go to the right side for a couple.
You said you're looking for a proponent to build the pipeline, but have you been in discussions with oil companies to commit capacity to that pipeline?
I don't believe that there's a problem committing capacity once the pipeline project is approved. And we've already seen this tested out. That the Enbridge just announced an open season on a pipeline expansion in the United States for 100,000 barrels. They had 400,000 barrels of interest. And so what we are hearing from the energy sector is, build it, they will come. Because there's no point in announcing an expansion project if you can't get it out of the province. We've done that before. We've seen Western Canada Select differential widen to as much as $30+ per barrel. So no energy company is going to go first on increasing production until they know that they can increase the pipeline capacity as well.
As a follow-up, do you think this can be done with absolutely no government ownership?
I think it can be done with us pledging barrels. This is why we created a framework with our bitumen royalty in kind program. We have Corrick already, which is our conventional oil royalty in kind program, and we will also be rolling out a gas royalty in kind. And the purpose behind that is so that we can either be first in or last in. So we can pledge 200,000 barrels to get things started if we need to demonstrate that we have an interest in seeing a project go ahead, or if we're not needed until the end to bridge the gap to be able to get all of the proponents, we can do that too. Because we also believe we can play a role as an aggregator, that we can either take the barrels in kind, or we can vacate the space to be able to make room for some of the small guys, which often have a hard time getting onto a project. And the good news about doing that is we don't pay unless the pipeline gets built. So that's what we've put to the industry, is the way in which we think that we can de-risk a project without having to pledge billions of dollars that might end up evaporating like we've seen happen in the past.
Can I get a quick show of hands for questions on the right side here? Quick. We'll go to Jen, and then we'll go to Rick.
Hi.
Yesterday, the head of OPEC said that he really backs Alberta's approach to LNG, and he called the global net zero initiatives unrealistic. So, and you also referred to that today, that the 2030, 2035 goals are impossible.
Yep.
So what is a realistic timeline, and how much decarbonization do you expect to see within that timeline?
Well, I think it's totally achievable for Canada by 2050 in a couple of different ways. One is carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We know that at today's technology can capture 70 to 75% of emissions, and it will only get better and better. We also know that because we have a decarbonized electricity grid for the most part with hydroelectric and with nuclear, In Alberta, our model is solar, wind with natural gas backup and carbon capture. We think that we can decarbonize there over a long enough period of time, perhaps also adding in interties with BC and Saskatchewan to be able to bring in nuclear and hydro. We also know with direct air capture, as it was mentioned at the end, carbon engineering has returned to Alberta. We also have the direct air capture center, so we're going to be doing work on that. But importantly, because we're using these mechanisms, the royalty in kind programs, we can now go internationally and we can market directly to companies and to coal plants to switch from coal to natural gas and be able to share credit for that. We can do the same thing, exporting ammonia to Japan and Korea and share credit for that under the clean energy transfer that we have under our existing international agreement for Paris. We've not done it before, but we think that that's going to also be a real opportunity, because if this is a global emissions reduction problem, Canada has 720 or thereabouts megatons of emissions each year. We can make so much progress just by getting the world to switch to the cleaner fuels that we produce here. So that's why I think that for Canada in particular, it is absolutely doable by 2050.
And along those lines, internationally, there's been some talk about strengthening the OPEC Plus relationship. So what is that going to look like between Alberta and OPEC Plus? And what's your position on the Paris Agreement?
Yeah, well, my Deputy Minister of Energy is going to be going to Vienna to be an observer at the OPEC meetings. Now that we are playing in an international space, we need to understand a little bit about what OPEC sees the world demand being and what the markets are going to look like. In the past, our sole customer was America. And so it wasn't as necessary to have a read on what was happening internationally. It's more necessary now, especially as we are at 1 million barrels of oil, growing, I hope, to 2.5 million barrels in short order. And then also with all of the potential for LNG. I saw that David Eby just announced that he was extending the permit approval process for the PRGT line, which will help Silisms, which is also going to be Alberta gas that can benefit from that. So when you have that kind of export happening internationally, it makes sense to talk to the people who have maybe a bit of a different perspective on where the oil markets are going. When I met with the Secretary General, he talked a conservative case of potentially having 120 million barrels per day of consumption by 2050, and a lot of that is going to be coming from the developing world. If we want to end energy poverty, we have to bring people up to the same energy standards that we have, and it's going to be a different mix perhaps as that is rolled out. But he pointed out to me that back in 1971, I believe 80% of the world's energy came from oil and gas, and today it's about 80% of the world's energy coming from oil and gas, and I think he anticipates in 2050 it'll probably be 80%. So I think that that's a good perspective for us to have, which is why we're going to be an observer at those events.
Thank you, Jim. We're going to go to Rick, and then we have time for one more question. We'll go to Laurence.
Good morning.
Hi, Mr. Bell.
I'll be back. Just want to get into the trenches of politics for a second here.
Yeah.
You mentioned when you were speaking with Peter Mansbridge in there, and the question was asked about whether, let's call it discontent or extreme discontent out there could be dampened down somewhat. Historically it has when things have gone well. The question I ask is the flip side to Mr. Mansbridge's question, which is a question I hope the answer is also being telegraphed to the Prime Minister. What are the risks involved if he does not listen, despite what he has said? Because we know there's huge frustration out there just because the Liberals won.
Yeah.
Could you imagine what the frustration will be if what you have been pitching almost daily, your let's call them the demands, plus the pipeline, does not go through? What is the risk to not having that happen?
Well, I hope the Prime Minister doesn't want to test it. Because I take it seriously. I have never seen separatist sentiment be as high as it is right now. We've done our own polling, and we've seen numbers as high as 37%. You look historically, I don't know if it's ever been that high. But again, I've also seen it dissipate when Ottawa addresses the legitimate concerns Alberta has. And I'm not kidding that the 9 demands are my short list. I know that there are other tensions that we have with the federal government, but a lot can get resolved when you have the means because people have good paying jobs, and you also have the revenues to be able to address some of the social pressures. So I think that for our sake and for the country's sake, I can't imagine that there will be another project on the national list that will generate as much revenue, as much GDP, as many high-paying jobs as a bitumen pipeline to the coast. So that will be my pitch, and I hope that he is willing to work with us on it. He seems to be giving us the indication that he is, but we'll know for sure in a few more months.
I know you mentioned in there again that you're waiting until they sit in the fall to actually, if they are going to deal with these laws that obviously are needed to get a pipeline going. But how do you feel about the fact that he hasn't given us very strong signals on that? In other words, if someone is the Prime Minister, they could say, I'm intending to deal with your issues, but I just don't have enough time in June. I'll do it in the fall. Yeah. He could say that. Yeah. He hasn't said that.
Yeah.
He could have given a stronger indication to people. I was just talking to your candidate yesterday in Old Stittsbury Three Hills, and I asked her, they have faith in your approach, but then I said, do they have faith in Carney? How many people have faith in what Carney is saying? And she said, none. Yeah. No, not at all, not one. Yeah. So would you feel better? Would you be in greater comfort? And would you like him to send stronger signals even now that he's prepared to do something, 2 months from now, 3 months from now? Might not be able to do it now, but he could sure send a signal to us.
Well, I guess the question would be, what does he need to do, right? What is the minimum he needs to do? And I can tell you that there are ways that we can find accommodation. He has to say that he's not having the emissions cap, and that means not bringing it in. So I think that not acting would be a positive move. On the issue of the tanker ban, maybe we come to an agreement that if all roads lead to Port of Prince Rupert, just carve out Port of Prince Rupert so that you can continue to protect the rest of the coast. I can live with that. We've already announced that we cannot see an increase in the industrial carbon price going up to 170, that 95, what we've heard from the industry, is enough. Will he accept that? And if he can accept that, then I think we have some common ground. So I'm prepared to go through these one at a time to see what the common ground might be. And so we put a table together. I have Rajan Sawhney and Jason Nixon as my two ministerial leads on that, my Chief of Staff, Rob Anderson. We've got our Deputy Minister of Energy and my Deputy Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, and we're asking for the federal government to put together an equal table. And then we'll go through these one at a time, and hopefully in the fall session, we'll be able to make some progress.
We have time for one last question. We'll go to Laurence.
Hi, thank you. Radio Canada has learned that Canada and the U.S. are working toward a trade agreement right now. There's a 5-page draft that is being exchanged between Mark Carney and Donald Trump. Are you confident in Mark Carney that he can deliver the trade agreement before the end of G7?
Well, let's look at the history of what has happened. Although there have been an awful lot of threats, what we have today is the vast majority of goods under the of all of the goods that are Canada-U.S. trade agreement compliant, have no tariffs on them. We do have tariffs on steel and aluminum, which makes no sense for the Americans. I mean, I was just down in Washington, and I said, we're sort of scratching our heads up here in Canada. You can't get this from anyone else. Why are you punishing your own industry? Because you're not going to be able to develop an aluminum industry. You get most of that from Canada. So I think that some of these policies they've put in place have their own penalty on American consumers. And then, of course, timber has been a long-standing issue that we've had to resolve. And what I'm very keen to see is if we come to an agreement on autos, because that is going to be devastating for Ontario if we do not have a return to the kind of integrated industry that we've always enjoyed. So I think that what we've seen so far is that there has been a reset of the Canada relationship. By all accounts, they have had a much more cordial first couple of meetings than his predecessor. I don't know if you saw the glossy sort of Hollywood-style video that the White House produced after Mark Carney left the White House. I don't think he did that for Trudeau, so I think that that's also an indication that things went pretty well. So I do have some confidence that, because I know that the Prime Minister's been working very hard to get to an agreement. All of the premiers have asked for an early renegotiation of the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, just so that we can have that stability rather than wait until next year. So if it comes as soon as the G7 or just before, I think that would be good for the country.
I have a follow-up. And Mark Carney's not excluding increasing counter tariffs if there's no deal before before the Energy Summit. What do you?
Well, I can tell you all of the complaints that I have had to deal with have come from the counter tariffs. I just had to advocate on behalf of energy companies because we are tariffing frac sand that is coming in from Wisconsin. We're tariffing drill bits that are coming in. We were tariffing steel beams that went to build the new plant at JBS. We're tariffing the barley that comes in to feed cattle. We're tariffing the salt that comes in to feed cattle. So I don't like counter tariffs because counter tariffs hurt our people. And so I have never been enthusiastic about saying, well, if they're going to hit us, let's hit them twice as hard, because it's hitting Canadians twice as hard. So I would rather say, let's find an agreement so that we can go back to having a tariff-free relationship.
That's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.